All right, we'll get going. So welcome everyone. Today we are doing a webinar on 2023 franchise development, past, present, and future. My name is Madeline. I'm the Director of Marketing at Netsertive, and we have with us Jennifer LoBianco of Best Life Brands and Patti Rother of the Now Massage Boutique. So we will get into little bios. So for myself, I am the Director of Marketing at Netsertive, and then also a multi-brand, multi-unit franchisee with Maid Pro, Pop, Patio Patrol, Men in Kilts, and Closetivity. I almost said Pop Patrol because I have kids, so that's where I'm at. And then we've got Jennifer LoBianco, who's the Chief Marketing Officer at Best Life Brands. Jennifer, thanks for being on. We just talked about the brands under you, so I'm going to let you do a little bit about yourself and your brands.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. It's always exciting to talk about franchise development. So I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Best Life Brands, and I've been in franchising for a long time now. Oh gosh, over 20 years. Time goes fast. And Best Life Brands is a family of brands dedicated to helping seniors during the continuum of care, we like to call it. And we like to help everyone live their best life possible. And those brands are Care Patrol, Comfort Care, Blue Moon Estate Sales, and Boost Home Health Care. So we help, like I said, seniors and other different individuals with their needs when it comes to senior living, estate sales, liquidation, and other type of services. So I'm happy to be here. We'll get into some more details later on, so I'll wait until then.
For sure. And of course, we have the all-star Patti Rother. I'm sure you've seen her all over franchising. She is now the VP of Franchise Development at the Now Massage Boutique. Patti, thanks for joining us. Give us a little bit about yourself and the Now.
Yeah, thanks so much. So I've been at the Now since January, so still kind of new. The Now is an emerging brand, but we are backed by a pretty large family office, so a ton of support and dollars behind us, which is always nice. Have both and. I also do consulting, as you all know, with Stay in Your Lane. So lots of different fun projects going on there. The Now has 45 locations open now and about 130 sold. We're hoping to add about 30 more this year, both open and sold. So growing very strategically and carefully.
Awesome. So with all this experience, I'm sure for our listeners, you either fallen somewhere between the emerging and the under the umbrella. So hopefully we'll be able to hit all of the hot spots there. A little bit about Netsertive. We are a multi-location marketing leader. We're heavy in the franchise space, one of the franchise top suppliers, and we've got some great partnerships with Z-Bar, Mosquito Shield, FranNet, Threshold. So if you haven't heard of us, check us out. But again, we love franchising, and we're here for all your franchising questions and needs. We're big in the education part, hence this webinar. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself or anyone at our team. So we're going to start with the franchise development landscape. What is going on in 2023? And it's pretty much the same as it usually is, as in franchising. Nothing changes too much. So with the economic recession and kind of uncertainty going around there, we are seeing leads go down. People are a little bit nervous with their money. They're not sure what's going to happen. We also see this in presidential election years, just unsure a little bit about where trends are going. So we are seeing that across the board with layoffs that are happening across all of the industries. This actually is an uptick in leads because a lot of time our qualified candidates then say, oh, well, this was kind of a good push to now do something I want to do, go somewhere where I can't get laid off. So they're using that kind of nest egg and looking into franchise, kind of a hard push into it, if you will. We are seeing franchise growth year after year. So of course, leads are continuing to climb there as people become more aware about franchise growth. And then also small business trends. So I don't know where my screen went. There it is. Small business trends. So what that means is there is a heavier focus on small business, buying small, and especially when it comes to services, because with Amazon as the big behemoth, a lot of people are not going to the stores anymore, getting all of their products mostly online, which means anytime they do go shop, they want to spend that money local, because a lot of the times the big box stores, i.e. Amazon, Target, are just getting their money for ease of service. So we are seeing small business trends go up, which means people again are looking into franchising. And then another thing I wanted to note is that now it doesn't happen with, every franchise. It really depends on your industry, but statistically, we see lead volumes go down seasonally in the summer. People are on vacation. They don't want to think about work. We typically see a lull in the lead volumes, and the same thing around Christmas time. During the holidays, people aren't looking to switch jobs. So we tend to see a slower volume of leads there. Of course, an uptick in the new year, new me, that sort of cycle. So we are still continuing to see those. And another thing to note is that for marketing and franchise sales, it's important to look at the lead time. So if we have a slowdown in leads in December, the sales team are probably not going to feel that lull for a couple months, because, it depends on your cycle, but from 6 weeks to a couple months, because it's not hitting right away. And what I mean by that is, once they get through the initial calls, we're kind of weeding through the unqualifieds. By the time they're getting around to those second and third and, FDD calls, that's when they're going to see the volume lift. If a couple months prior or a couple weeks prior, you had a lull. So that is something to look for as well. Patti, I'm going to pass it to you. Do you have any comments on kind of the landscape you're seeing right now?
Yeah, definitely seeing leads kind of slow down just a bit. I think what's interesting when there's ever kind of uncertainty, it either pushes people forward, meaning if they weren't willing to take a risk, the constant uncertainty around layoffs pushes them to finally, get into business for themselves. And then if you're really looking for existing franchise owners who want to diversify portfolios, this is the perfect time to be reaching out to them directly, because they already know that economic downturns are actually the best time to invest. So really taking advantage of that a little bit and saying, hey, we all know how this goes. Now's a great time to look into diversifying your portfolio and really targeting those folks. That's kind of what I've been doing lately.
For sure. And what about you, Jennifer?
Yeah, it's a great topic. And I was going to say that we haven't seen a slowdown in lead flow yet. We anticipate it and we know it's going to be coming. And I think just understanding trends in the past really helps us, prepare for the future. So what happened during 2008 and 2009 on Wall Street, and just really seeing what happened then. And all of a sudden you got this mass exodus there, and you had a lot of investors and people looking for franchise opportunities. Who knows what's going to happen really this year, being consistent with that or not. But I think it's just being poised and ready for whatever might occur. One of the things we've been focused on the past year is really looking at our conversion time, right? So from when a lead comes in to when it actually converts to an award, and really trying to tighten it up as much as possible. And that's really what we've been focused on. And we anticipate that coming up, where people might be making decisions quicker as this happens, but you never know really. Again, you can only take the information you have from trends in the past, and again, hopefully predict the future. But yeah, like I said, we haven't really seen leads slow down that much. We're just being poised and ready to go if we're going to have to, make a quick shift and spend and see what's going to work out or not, And I think the other thing too is, for all of us in franchising here, we always say it's always a good time to franchise, right? even though it's cyclical and there's trends and there's seasonality, of course, we're always like, it's a great time to franchise. So we need to make sure we're in front of the right people at the right time. And hopefully that we've been positioning ourselves to do that.
And I think that's a great way to put it. When I was in the franchise development sector on the brand side, we'd get a lot of fear from our sales team when, leads would even slow down a little bit. And the reality is it's going to happen. You're never going to have this steady, ideally you would, but it's never going to be just a steady incline all the time, month after month, week after week. And like you said, being poised for when there is a slowdown and being ready to kind of navigate that in terms of pivoting spend, pivoting messaging, and making sure your nurture times and your conversion times are, like you said, all buttoned up. So that's great. So just, kind of a brief overview. And now we're going to get into pretty much the big topic of the top lead generators. And I'm going to let Jennifer start this one off. So right here is a word cloud of surveyed, I don't know, 40, 50 different brands on, where are you getting your leads? And you can see the word cloud's not that big. And the bigger words are the traditional things that you're doing. So again, Google Ads, brokers, trade shows, websites, social media, that's all, where people are. But talk to me, Jennifer, about, how you're making sure that they're consistent, that your sales team is keeping busy, but you're also getting the quality that you need.
Yeah, great question. It's always that constant balance between quantity and quality, right? So it's making sure that they have enough leads to be able to have a lot of conversations. And then hopefully the percentage is high enough where it comes out the back end and we've converted enough to awards. But quality is a big focus always, right? Because we don't want them wasting, our lead qualifiers wasting their time. So I've been with the brand now for almost 2 years. And I've really tried to keep steady sort of what's working every month, right? So make sure that we're committed to a specific ad spend when it comes to all of our Google ads, our social media, our SEO. But then I'm always testing new things, right? So we always have portals going on. We always have social, paid search, and of course, SEO. And then we test new things as time goes on. So we might look at a direct mail campaign. We might look at putting more towards local events. But that's kind of my philosophy in marketing in general, whether I'm on the consumer side or the brand dev side. It's, keeping a consistent flow on what you think has been working, at least in the past, but then always testing new things. For us, the big challenge is we have 4 brands and I have a specific budget per brand, of course, but there are times when something might be pulling really well. Like we have one brand that does pretty well with converting social leads into real conversations. But then one of our other brands, social doesn't work at all. So for me, it's constantly looking at the mix and the levers, not only with spend, but media mix, messaging, and looking at all of those variables across 4 brands. Because again, what works for one definitely doesn't work for the other. Even if 3 of them are in the healthcare space, one is in skilled nursing, one is in home health and caregiver, and the other one is in senior care advisors. So even though they're similar, they are different. 3 of the 4 are not brick and mortar. One requires a physical location. So they are a little different. Some require experience, some don't. So again, for us, it's constantly having that digital mix and maybe trying some traditional stuff offline if we have the money. But broker, PR, portals, those are things that have always been consistent. I remember 15 years ago getting into Fran Dev and thinking, the costs were high for certain tactics we were using. And 15 years later, we're still using them. Brokers still converted a really great level for us. So do portals, So I think the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? Isn't that the saying? But we always have a really healthy combination of things running at any given time.
So it's interesting that you say, your brands are in a similar space, but, social might work for one and not for the other. And I think that is always the biggest pain point in Fran Dev is we're always looking for how much can I spend in one place and get a franchisee. And that's kind of, what we're up against the consumer, but it's more, we've kind of accepted on the consumer side now. You can't just send out a direct mail and you're going to spend $6,000 and get clients for $150 because there's so many different places for people to see you now. And I feel like Fran Dev executives haven't gotten there in terms of understanding the need for different pieces to pull together to create a sale yet. So how important do you think it is to maintain social for, say, the other 2 brands that it's not converting well, to keep them on? Or do you keep it on at all when you know that there is a channel that might not be delivering the highest quality leads? What say you for the engagement part of that and the touch points?
Yeah, so for your specific question about, let's say, take social, I always have some sort of paid social running for 3 of the 4 brands. One, it really doesn't work at all. So for the 3 brands, I have social running at all times because it does drive web traffic. And we've seen, of course, our overall website leads go up, when social is on. When I have turned social off completely, overall of course, web traffic goes down. Overall web leads go down. So we know that there's a symbiotic relationship between the two. So I haven't completely turned it off for those, because I do know that there's the effect of having digital all working together at the same time. I don't know the impact if I completely, like I said, turned it off. I don't think it would be extremely significant, but I do think that some of the web leads, we would have a decrease in overall web leads because of that. So I do think it's important to keep it running.
That's great. And then my last question for you is, you mentioned portals, and a lot of people have a love-hate relationship with portals because it provides the steady volume, but there is a lot of weeding. So what is your take on that? Especially since you've got 4 different brands, you've got enough volume to have these sales qualifiers, why keep them on if a lot of it is busy work?
Yeah, we've actually had a very nice conversion rate for portals, but we've narrowed it down, right? So we started with a lot going out till 10, 15 portals. Now we're down to 4 or 5 at any given time. So we've really optimized it over time. And we know the ones that work for us brands, for our brands. I used to work at an advertising agency, and we had, like 10 franchise development clients at any given time. And those portals that worked there don't work for my brands now. They're just a completely different concept. So again, for us, we found a few that work really well. So we keep them open, but we are constantly changing our budget on the portals every month. So that's nice, right? Because with everything, you can dictate what your spend is. You can be very nimble. We're not just doing print ads, and direct mail and buying very expensive email lists like we used to be doing. Now we can be very judicious with our spend and constantly change it and move those levers. So again, for us, the portals are working. If they're not, we just remove them. But we don't see it as a negative having to use your word, weed through all of that to get to the diamond in the rough, because a lot of them are, really good conversations. They might know someone else that's a friend or a family member of them that might be a referral source for us. But you definitely don't want to send thousands of leads from portals to your lead qualifiers. It's wasting their time. And there's different things you can try. You can try short form versus lead forms. You can have them pre-qualify on your website so they don't have to talk to someone first. We do keep the portals though that work for us. Of course, the few that work, we maintain.
Yeah. And I like your point on, you have to continuously work the portals. I think a lot of franchise development teams, especially on the marketing side, because they tend to be smaller, use them as set it and forget it. And that's just one way where you are going to get more, you're going to fall down, the ranks and probably not get as great quality or quantity as you want. So making sure to continue working and looking at those analytics, just like you would any other spend, is a great advice. Thank you, Jennifer. So now, Patti, on to you, because you have an emerging brand, which means territory galore. But as you mentioned, growing strategically is the key to success here. So what is your hot take on lead generators? Which ones do you use? Where is your thought process on this?
Yeah, so this is such an interesting topic always. And I actually think a lot of friend of folks kind of put the cart before the horse. If you've heard me talk about franchise development, you've heard me talk about knowing who you're targeting first before you ever spend a dollar. What works for some brands isn't going to work for you if your candidates are completely different. So really, really doing the work up front to understand who your target prospects are, and then understanding where they spend their time. If you're looking for folks who have never done franchising before, maybe they're leaving corporate jobs and they're not familiar with this, but they've heard about it and they've heard why maybe it'll reduce their risk, they need the level of support that franchising offers them, then something like a portal or Google Ads makes a ton of sense, because they're going to be searching kind of these generic terms that are probably going to start pulling up your brand, especially if you're focusing on brand agnostic content and just putting out good information about franchising and why franchising model works for people. That's a great place to start. If you're targeting existing franchise owners, a portal is never going to work for you. Google Ads may not work. They're likely going to start with your brand name. They've heard of you before, they've seen you before, they might actually just contact you directly on LinkedIn. And so understanding who you're targeting is super, super important, because I think oftentimes so many brands will just throw a ton of marketing dollars out there and have that tell them who their candidates are. But if you want to grow strategically, you got to do it the other way around, which takes a little bit of time and it takes a whole lot of effort, but it's definitely worth it, because then you get those quality people. The other thing to consider is geo-targeting. If your brand is based at the Southeast, it's probably ideal to grow in the Southeast first before you start like sending someone out to Washington State. Obviously, we all want to be opportunistic, but if you think about where you want to put your marketing dollars, let's put them in the area that we really do want to grow in, where we can really support our franchise owners. And then you can utilize social media and geofencing and geo-targeting to really focus on spending dollars in Florida and Georgia, and in the states that you really want to grow into. So I'm all about, I've been with emerging brands for a while now. You have to be scrappy. You have to get really creative, and you usually have smaller budgets. So really being strategic is always really important to me. And also you're dealing with smaller teams. So if a portal is sending me 1,000 leads, to your point, I'm going to be really annoyed, because that's 1,000 people I have to call to figure out that they're not at all qualified. So also understanding the analytics part of it, we want to close 24 deals this year, backing that out and saying, okay, if I need to close 24, how many people do I need in my pipeline any given month? And to get the amount of people in my pipeline, how many leads do I need to attract to actually convert? And if I'm trying to get that many people to convert, how many people do I actually need to land on my website or on the form filler in the ad? And really backing it out to understand, like, is 10 leads a week going to get it? Or do I need 20? Because then you're probably going to have to reevaluate where you're spending your marketing dollars. So I look at it a little bit differently. I really want to make sure that we're spending our time wisely, spending our dollars wisely, and understanding, who am I trying to attract? Who's the franchise owner that I need? Typically anywhere from like 3 to 5 little avatars that you can create, and then decide, okay, Google Ads makes a ton of sense. Just because this is the biggest word cloud word doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to work for you specifically to your candidate. Right now for us, we're targeting existing franchise owners and existing business owners mostly. So we're doing a lot with Google Ads. We're obviously using broker networks, because those are just pretty reliable and steady for us. And then trade shows and organic leads through our website do really well as well. With trade shows, I try and set up as many one-on-one meetings as I can ahead of time. So I'm not just going there with no plan. Again, I'm all about strategy. So I want to set up as many one-on-one conversations while I'm with the folks there, to really make the best of my time.
And how are you setting those one-on-one meetings up pre-trade show? Because I think a lot of people go to trade shows and are getting the leads there, but it sounds like you kind of know who you're going after ahead of time. So how do you find those? Is it like a lot of LinkedIn sleuthing, or do you pull lists? How do you handle that?
Yeah, so definitely a lot of LinkedIn sleuthing. I use Hunter as kind of an email finder. It's an AI tool that's really great. There's also some other AI tools that are plugins onto Chrome that help you find contacts. MUFC is next week, so that's a great example. We actually did a bronze sponsorship just so we could get access to the attendee list, which is a great way to spend marketing dollars if you're just trying to get in front of people. And then sending out everything from like a drip email to messages through LinkedIn, and really just trying to set up one-on-one meetings, quick meetings, so that they're nice and easy for people to commit to. There's a bunch of different like creative ways. And then even while you're there, it's sometimes really fun, especially if it's a trade show. So like I was at Franchise Expo West in Phoenix. You can do geofencing ads while you're actually there and tell people, especially when it's a free show, right? Like you don't actually have to pay anything to walk the floor. So come on in, meet us. We have a booth, or I will be there taking meetings, and here's where I'll be. And take advantage of some of that geofencing, because you can literally tell it exactly where you want it to pop up into people's Facebook, feed.
That's awesome. That's such a good tip. And then my last question on this is, because you're working strategically and in geofencing automatically is going to make your lead numbers go down just because of search volume and stuff like that. How do you work with your investors or your board or, you know, your president, your CEO, whoever, who is excited to see a lot of growth, but you also know I have to be realistic in terms of the volume and awarding correct franchisees, not people that are going to destroy the system. So how do you make sure that check and balance is in place?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm somewhat unique in the franchise development space because I came through operations first. So I actually worked in operations for franchise owners and then kind of came over to the dark side and got to sales. So I think I have just a different process than maybe most like quote unquote salespeople. I think making sure that your sales process involves other folks before you get them to a discovery day is super important. Is there an exec call? Do they talk to your head of operations first? Is there kind of like these little check marks along the way to make sure that you're really getting the right people? There's nothing worse than having like 15 people come to discovery day and then have your exec team be like, I only liked 2 of them. I don't know what the other 13 were doing here. So making sure that your process is aligned with the expectations so that when they come to discovery day and the rest of the team gets a chance to meet them, they're the right candidates. They're obviously financially qualified. They've done all the work that they need to do. And your team can love them. I think coming from operations, there's also just, you can kind of tell when someone's going to be good and maybe when they're not going to be. I also think cultural fit is a huge, huge factor that sometimes we skip over. You know, these are 10-year plus relationships. If you can't sit down and like have a meal with this person, you probably don't want them to be a franchise owner in your system, right? Like think about the person on the other end. I did franchise coaching and I oversaw franchise operations. Like that squeaky wheel through the process is 100% going to be a squeaky wheel once they're in your system. So thinking through that, and especially the cultural fit, is super, super important, and making sure that those people in operations get an opportunity to kind of do a quick gut check before you sign anyone is going to be super important as well.
I agree. Yeah. If you can't have a meal with someone, we've all been on those bad first dates. It's just not going well.
And you know, what's that quote? Like when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Like 1000% in franchising, you gotta go there. So even if they're financially qualified and they check all the other boxes, like if they're a jerk, they're probably still going to be a jerk 5 years from now.
And it's such a people relationship process that you're right. You know, it's sometimes, well, I think all the time you got to weigh the culture with the investment money, because obviously those shiny coins can be real shiny at times, but could end up costing you money down the road. And we do have a question. Do you see lead generators change due to investment size? This person's franchise investment ranges anywhere from 300K to 6 million, depending on whether the franchisees lease or own their real estate. So do you see having to cover all of those, you know, that broad span of investment using different lead generators, or do you think you just use specific ones for the higher investment ones? I
can answer really quick and then hand it over to Jennifer. So that's where I would say you have different avatars. So you have a specific franchise owner avatar that you've created for someone who's going to lease, because they're going to have very different financial expectations. And you'll probably find them in different places. Like that might be more social media, that might be more portal leads. And then you're going to have this specific avatar for someone who can own. They're obviously going to have a lot more financial wherewithal to be able to do that. And typically you're going to find them in a very different place. To Jennifer's point earlier, like you're going to have kind of always on marketing that might capture both, but you're going to want to specifically think through, you know, someone who can buy land and build a building. What the ad says is probably going to be really, really different than what attracts the person who can lease. So also thinking about copy, you know, what's the CTA for those two people and really targeting them differently.
That's awesome. Jennifer, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, my answer is pretty consistent. I was going to say definitely from my years of experience, just different franchise concepts. Usually those people that are coming through the portals to us have lower net income. They have less assets. So it really depends on what your concept requires upfront and then over time. So definitely it depends on, that's a really good question because it really depends. I would say our leads right now, most of our leads coming from search engine optimization have a higher income. Obviously those coming from our brokers because our brokers are spending a lot of time with them, but those coming from portals and some of our other digital efforts are definitely have less assets, which could be fine for one concept, but not for another. We have developed very specific personas for every one of our brands because we're not, the majority of our new franchise owners are not, have not formally been a franchisee or a business owner. They are occupational therapists, RNs, physical therapists. They are highly experienced in their field, especially when it comes to 3 of our concepts. For Blue Moon, you can come, you don't need a brick and mortar, you can start up pretty quickly. You don't need a lot of assets necessarily. It's good to have a sales and marketing background and be very personable, but the other concepts, most of them don't require, but they do come in as someone who has had healthcare experience. The other thing we really found with our concepts and good conversion rate is, and this goes for, it seems so obvious, but I don't think all companies do it really well, is really looking at your consumers. A lot of our those people that have been customers or clients of our brands see the value and then become franchisees. That doesn't happen at all of the concept I've worked at. Sometimes there's a big disconnect. I worked for a brand once that was a daycare brand, a daycare franchise. And we were like, oh, teachers like kids, maybe they're a good target because when they retire, no, when teachers retire, they're like, I'm done, I'm out of here. I don't want to see a 5-year-old ever again. So it's interesting, for our brands also, we don't necessarily look for investors. We're looking for, and I've come from concepts where we're looking for investors to buy 8 to 10 locations. Here you're starting with 1. We don't have a lot of multi-unit operators because they're hands-on. It's relationship building, it's hands-on. So currently anyway, we don't have a lot of investment groups and not a lot of multi-unit operators. We're looking for those 2 individuals to expand over time because we don't want, 1,000 franchisees and 1,000 locations. Of course, we want less. We want a lot of locations, but a less number of franchisees to have multi-unit operators. But for us, it's not about like selling a 5-pack out of the gate or things like that. So our personas are very different for each one and we target accordingly.
That's a great answer. And I agree. While it is the same brand and you're saying, my investment level is $1 to 100 million, there's different personas that fall in there. And depending on, does your franchise fee grow with the $1 million or $100 million candidate, based on your budget, do what Patti said, build it out backwards. And then you can kind of see, are you going to go after those with less assets, or are you going to go, where does that scale weigh? We have another question from Geraldine. As an emerging franchise, when do you feel like it makes sense to start advertising for franchisees rather than just continuing corporate build out? Is there a milestone, not in terms of time, but in terms of mastering your concept, when it then makes sense to start expansion? Patti, I'll let you lead with this one as well.
Hi, Geraldine. So, I think you're going to get a ton of different answers to this because I think it's somewhat of a loaded question. There are some franchise concepts that'll say, whenever you want, just start, just go. I think I'm a little different in the sense that I would want my franchise owners to be wildly successful. And especially those first few are going to validate your future franchise owners. And so you want them to be extra successful maybe than not. So I think once you've been able to write down your processes, your procedures, you feel confident about the system of support you have in place so that someone who knows nothing about your concept, nothing about real estate, nothing about build outs can successfully kind of complete all of those steps to get open and operating. If you feel confident in the system of support, then go for it. That's kind of what I would say, and definitely encourage just local geographical growth close to where you do have your corporate locations, so that you can really support those early franchise owners as well, in-person visits.
Yeah, and I'd add on to that, as you mentioned earlier, you can, just because you turn on franchising doesn't mean you have to accept every qualified person you love in the door. You can start slow, you can grow slow. While I was with Threshold Brands, we actually built a mosquito and tick franchise from the ground up. We didn't own any corporate stores, and instead we went to our then Made Pro franchisees and said, hey, we're starting a new brand. It's, right out of the gate. So is there someone or someones that want to raise their hand and be part of this building process? So they knew it was going to be, grind. They knew there's probably going to be extra investment. They knew they were going to be part of building out the processes. And my husband and I bought one, and it's 4 years in, and we just started breaking even, but we knew that going in, where obviously now if they buy in, it's 6 months. But so finding that right person that also understands you're in that early expansion and wants to be kind of part of an extended franchisor, if you will. Jennifer, did you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, you know what? I've worked at concepts where we've had many corporate owned locations before we started franchising, and others we had one, and then it was like, okay, let's go. I do agree with Patti, though, having an infrastructure in place and standard operating procedures, and obviously operations and training is super important. That's very well planned out before you open. I've been at concepts where we've started too soon, and we've signed franchisees, and then within a year they're all closed. Like the first 10 are closed. That's not good, obviously, because then you don't have good validation, right? Nobody's going to validate well for the franchise if they've opened and closed because you were open too soon. So I do think that it's a methodical approach, but I also think my mentality always is sometimes you just have to go, okay, it's good enough, we're going to start, because it might never be good enough. But having the support is critical. Having an operations team, or at least a person there. I love corporate owned locations because as the head of marketing, of course, I love having them to be able to test things and try out things before we roll them out to the system. On the negative side of it, where it's hard though, and this is a little bit different topic, is to manage that, right? Because now you're managing corporate locations, you're managing staff, personnel, overhead, budgets. So it is a whole nother business unit. But in terms of franchising, obviously being able to test and make changes there before you roll them out to the system is beneficial. But yeah, I don't think there's a silver bullet when it comes to number of locations before you franchise. Because again, I've seen some where it was, let's go, or now there's where we're going to wait until we have 50. And then, so I really think it depends. But yeah, that's what's so fun about it, right? And challenging.
Love it. Well, we, as I suspected, are going to run up on time. So we're going to hit the next one, which is pipeline nurturing. Patti's more involved with this. I will have Jennifer speak to kind of some of the email marketing and stuff. But what we mean by this is, what is the marketing team's responsibility versus franchise sales? And in pipeline nurturing, I'm talking touch points from as soon as they submit a form all the way to, validation calls. So they're closing. There's a whole bunch of different aspects to ensure that you are moving your candidates through. You're also qualifying them as you go, and you're getting them to that franchise award, if you will. My take on it is it needs to be a mix of both. So in my experience, what we did is, when a lead came in, it went through, the automated CRM, and it would automatically go into persona email drips, where we knew they were going to get one every 7 to 14 days. Over time, we built out the drips to last a year. They would even stay in if they were no longer interested, or they became a franchisee because they were purely educational and brand built. And then we let the franchise sales staff use their personal emails to then kind of push them forward. So they were still getting touches outside of franchise sales, but again, those were automated. And if they needed to book a call and the franchise salesperson for whatever reason wasn't available, they could. But now, since I've been kind of out of that game for a while, we're seeing a lot more AI, for instance, that can do text messaging, social media bots, video on the fly. So Patti, talk to me, because you're the development guru here, on your thoughts on pipeline nurturing. How important is it? How much do you need? And how much of your effort needs to go into the nurture versus the actual sale versus the marketing?
Yeah, this is such a great topic. So we will use a program called Lumen AI. There's a bunch of different ones that will help send text messages as soon as someone completes a form on our website and we kind of get it through our CRM. They'll start sending text messages to schedule that call. So that's kind of happening in the background. We obviously also have email drips. And I like to switch it up here a little bit, where there's like the beautiful marketing templated, branded emails, as well as ones that look like I'm just writing them personally, to really switch up like what might get into their inbox based on, blockers and things for emails actually getting delivered. Switching it up so that you ensure you're there. And then obviously calls. I think once someone's active in your pipeline, there's a ton of really fun things that you can do kind of with your marketing team, as well as on your own or with your sales team. I have different stages where I introduce following our various social channels, because I think it's overwhelming for you, like on the first call, to kind of get them all the information and then say, oh, and don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and LinkedIn. They're most likely not going to do it. So I think it's great to kind of like pepper those in, because I want them to see the content that we put out there. I want them to be educated on what the consumer sees as well. And then, depending on how long your process takes, you should touch them various times through various channels. I'm very active on LinkedIn, and I make sure to connect with anyone who's in my pipeline so that they're actually seeing the content I push out. I want them to know that I am a human who lives a human experience, and that I'm a mom, that I'm passionate about the now and wellness. And so I want them to see that content as well. And whether they become a franchise owner or not, it's just a great person to have kind of in that space, because you never know, they might come back around. We also make sure that anyone who comes through the CRM gets added to kind of our master marketing list, so that the newsletters we're putting out every month go to these folks as well. So again, just different content, more consumer facing. They're seeing just various information, press hits, different things like that. And then I think obviously, Discovery Day is a great time for gifting, for swag. I think those are folks that are going to be really committed. They've obviously purchased a ticket and they're investing actual dollars at this point. So when you're a candidate with the Now, we give you a massage complimentary when you come for Discovery Day the day before.
Well, I'm buying one just for the massage.
Right? And then a really amazing gift box that kind of showcases the retail line that we have. So again, really intentional and curated, but we want them to have that experience and obviously take a bit of the Now home. So I think there's a lot of different ways that you can interact. Like me personally, I use automation as much as I can. Obviously every step of the process, there's kind of like the automated drips that are going to go out based on where they are. And then making sure that they're just seeing different forms of content too, based on your social pages and different things.
That's awesome. And it really goes to show that like as much effort as you're putting into getting the leads, the same thing needs to go into your pipeline, not just, the super qualified people are at the end. And Jennifer, I know you're top of the funnel and that's, where I lived too, but with all your experience, how do you handle kind of that love-hate, push-pull relationship between marketing and sales where, you want sales to use the marketing, but you also don't have the capabilities to create a new presentation, create a new template, create a new whatever, for every single person that walks in the door. So how do you make sure that your brands are set up for success down the road after that initial marketing push?
Yeah, so the way kind of it's divided here is I oversee franchise development, marketing, lead generation, all the marketing support. And like I mentioned before, consumer and franchise marketing. And then we have a head of sales, and he obviously is responsible for managing the sales team. But what that means on my side of things is, other than all the advertising campaigns and driving the leads, We obviously manage HubSpot. So we manage we use HubSpot for automation. We manage all the email nurture campaigns based on personas, based on passive versus active. We identify at a certain period of time that they might be more passive after a certain amount of days, but they then go into our ongoing nurture, similar to what Patti mentioned, or an ongoing drip campaign. And then anyone that's active right after a certain period of time, obviously the sales team now is following up consistently one-to-one. We, though, provide a lot of content and support for that. So while they're doing all of their communication, whether it's out of LinkedIn or Salesforce, our CRM that we use, we help provide content. So we develop a lot of content, a lot of materials, white papers, ebooks, videos, tons of content that they at any point in time have in their library that they can pull, and they can shoot off one-to-one email communication or social media posts, whatever they want to do in their personal accounts. So we provide all the support necessary for them to be successful. We also use Lumen as well for our text messaging and chat. So we're very involved in terms of the advertising and marketing, but then when it comes to one-to-one, we're there to provide support. They're always asking us, obviously, for help. The sales team, we're very close knit. We have a great relationship with them. And it's really important, obviously, because we're on the same team when it comes to that. We develop presentations for them. Obviously I'm presenting on every confirmation day. So it's very tight knit. And then we have some of our sales team, they're very creative and they come up with some awesome messaging and marketing on their own that they want to send out, and they run by us. And I say to them, by all means, do it. You guys have to move quickly, and you have to build those relationships personally. So I think it's the best sort of combination I've seen so far that I've been a part of, that where we work together and provide them what they need, and then they do a lot, obviously creating on their own.
I love that. And I love that it's a two-way communication, because we used to ask our franchise sales, what are they saying on the phones with you? Why do they like us? How did they find us? Because there's only so many times that you're going to say, oh, they found us on Google. These people are having the conversation. So use the talking points that they have, and really pushing those into your messaging. Another question.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, one of the things that we did over the past year was we kept a running list of all the objections. So every time someone has an objection, right? And now I've done it in the past, but this was it was a concerted effort to really keep track, like in a spreadsheet, all of them. And every one, we developed a piece of marketing against each one of those. So it's like when somebody says X, the answer is Y. Like we have it ready to go, and the sales team has it at their disposal. And we found that really valuable because anybody can rattle off the top 20, not the right time, too expensive, whatever. But we kept, like I said, this very robust list, and it's interesting. Every now and then there's a new objection you hadn't heard before. So
what's really cool about that, Jennifer, is you can create. So there's this AI tool called Character AI. You can actually create a specific bot that you can give to your sales team, where if they kind of have somebody say one of those, they can ask the bot, and the bot will tell them exactly what to say back based on your training of it. So it's kind of cool. They have an expert in their pocket who can help them with whatever retort they might need at the time. And it's instant, instead of the drips can go out afterwards. But that's really fun, that I've seen really effective, especially with kind of those earlier, whether it be a coordinator or manager level, where they're still kind of getting their feet under them. It's really hard to kind of be brave enough to not just say, oh, okay, no worries. Nice to meet you, and end the conversation, but to really push. So that's been something cool that we've been testing out.
I'm gonna test it for my kids. I don't want that for dinner. What do I say?
Yeah, exactly.
What do I say instead of throwing the spaghetti against the wall?
Good luck with that. Tell us how it goes.
Yeah.
McDonald's for everyone. Jennifer, how many people do you have on your sales team per brand? That was asked in the thing.
Yeah. So right now there are, how many total? So for the smallest brand, there's 4. And then for the largest brand, it goes up to, I think there's 6 now. But then there are lead qualifiers. There's 4 lead qualifiers. There's 1 for each brand. And then based on the brand size. So for the smallest brand, right now we have 120 locations. We have 4 sales team members.
And here's a question for you, because I don't think I ever mastered this, is for your lead qualifiers, do they work specifically? It sounds like they work specifically 1 in each brand, but if they come across a lead and maybe this is your sales staff, not your qualifier, but if they come across a lead that might not end up being interested in one brand, do you cross market for another brand? And at what point do you do that effectively?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So two-part answer to that. First, on the front end in advertising, we haven't found cross-brand advertising effective in FranDev. So I've tried it where I've done like a portfolio ad or gone out like we were a portfolio company, and if you don't fit here, you fit there. That has not worked on the front end. But yes, on the back end, it has worked. We have flipped someone that has come in and said, you know what, I'm really interested in comfort care, let's say, for home care, that type of agency. That might require a little bit too much of what they're looking to do. And you have to manage a staff, you have to manage a staff of caregivers, and you have a brick and mortar to one of our other brands where you don't have to do that. It's a different model. So yes, that usually happens if the sales qualifier identifies that that might be an objection. If they do at that point in time, they usually then pull in someone from the sales team that then introduces them to someone else. Our sales team, they're by brand, but the qualifiers do sometimes like move from one to the next. But yeah, it has happened where one has gone from one to the other.
I love that. And I don't feel like a total failure because I tried so hard. I'm like, we are an umbrella brand. Look at all of the opportunities. And it just never worked. But yeah, from the back end. And that's good to know that your qualifiers can kind of be flexible there, because I think that's important, especially if they're the first touch. And we're going to touch on this briefly, and this is for Patti. How much does territory expansion and then selling, an additional unit, not just like a 5-pack, like Jennifer said up front, play into your goal setting? Because this still falls under franchise development, but it's not necessarily bringing in a franchise fee right away. So how do you keep that on your balance sheet, and also make sure you're tackling kind of the needs there with your current owners?
Yeah, so this one can definitely be tricky. I think understanding early on when a candidate does come through your pipeline and you're having those ongoing conversations where they're like, I think I might want to start with 1 or 2 and then see where that goes. One is level setting expectations, like totally get that that's what you want to do. Understand that in 5 years, when you might be ready for expansion, that territory may not be available. But also letting them know that that's common, and something that a lot of people will do within a system. I also think being really honest and upfront with all of your franchise owners when somebody does come through the pipeline. We don't reserve territory. We don't have like territory holds. We don't do anything like that. But if I have a great franchise owner, I don't know, in Boston, and somebody comes along and is interested in Boston, if they get to a certain point in the pipeline, I'm calling that franchise owner and saying, hey, I just wanted to let you know we have a qualified lead. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on expansion, but before I go too far down with this person, I wanted to check in with you first. I think that's just a good thing to be doing in general, because you never know. You might think that the person in Boston never wants to expand. They're great with 3. That's all they wanted to do. But maybe they have 2 open and they're doing really, really well, and are thinking, man, like 5 or 7 of these would be awesome. The timing gets tricky. You have to manage that piece, right? Like they may have to commit in the next month, or you're going to sell it to somebody else. So managing that conversation and definitely like being a human and empathetic about it too, is important. But I think understanding your franchise owner's goals upfront, making sure that your internal team knows that too. And then making sure that it's always an option. So I think, in our newsletters, in our communication to franchise owners, we're constantly talking about referral. We're constantly talking about additional expansion. So we've actually had franchise owners who have added to their area development agreements as they're developing, which is amazing. And obviously, we'd rather continue to grow with existing owners first before introducing new owners, especially within certain markets. So it's kind of this balance of both and making sure, again, you just have like that honesty and transparency as part of your culture. Our head of real estate is really awesome about letting us know if somebody has mentioned further expansion so that we can really stay on top of it. And I, as a salesperson, can reach out and say, hey, so-and-so let me know that expansion is on your radar. And I would love to have a conversation, just let you know what that would look like. So just, again, like working within your team as well and making sure that kind of everyone's communicating all of the time.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point about the transparency and communication, because our franchisors, we have a couple, but they don't do holds either. But we've always appreciated if someone's coming to us and saying there's going to be a resale, next to you, or, we're looking to put in another franchisee. How do you feel about that? Because honestly, 9 times out of 10, because there's probably been 10 times we've ended up just buying the territory, because it just
Right.
ends up being easier opening up another office, and that, that's easier for everyone. But at the same time, if we're not interested, a lot of times my husband and I will say, all right, well, we'll do a validation call for you, because we want to know who's going to be next to us, because good chances to be in the similar community, similar marketing and that sort of thing. So that's
well,
really.
and I was just going to say, there's nothing worse than not telling a franchise owner and then having them get a validation call from someone who's like, oh, you're in Orlando. I want to open in Orlando too. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Don't do that. Don't be that franchisor. Don't.
Yeah. Yeah. It's never, yeah. That's like, hey, I'm going to date your boyfriend.
Right. Hope you're cool with it.
Not great. And then Jennifer, I'm going to pull you in one quick question. So some franchisors of umbrella brands, or I guess any brand, they sometimes put franchise development marketing on consumer pieces, and they cut a piece of the marketing fund off, or a price off, because they're using a piece of that consumer marketing for Fran Dev. Have you done that? Do you recommend that? And if so, how do you go about that with your franchisees?
So we do not do that where I am right now, currently at Best Life Brands. That's a slippery slope. It's difficult. I've learned this a really long time ago, that any ad is a franchise development ad. Even if it doesn't say own a franchise, it's a consumer ad, but it's really a brand ad, right? And every ad is going to potentially bring in a franchisee, even if it's a consumer ad, because it's just getting your name out there. We don't intentionally do it. We do not currently have franchisees get any sort of discount if they put an ad for franchise development on there.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked at locations where there's a brick and mortar and we do point of sale. We have, point of sale materials and displays. But looking at franchise development opportunities, but currently that's not a tactic we use. And in my past life, I haven't found it really worked. We get, like I said here and at other companies I've worked at, we get a fair share of customers turning into franchisees just because they love the concept so much and they had a great experience. But we don't do it like, overtly advertise to them. No.
Great. I've had that question come up a lot, and I didn't have experience with that, but that's, really good to know. And I love that, quote of the year is, any ad is a franchise ad. That's part of being a part of a well-known brand. So that's really great. We are literally 1 minute on time. So if anyone wants to drop in a last minute question, we've got about 60 seconds to do that. And in the meantime, while we wait for any questions, we will be posting the recording of this webinar. You can connect with myself, Patti, and Jennifer on LinkedIn. And then also we will be putting together a couple slides on, the cliff notes of this webinar. So if you want to share it with your teams and they're not going to listen to an hour-long recording, you can share that with them as well. And Andy says, thanks. So we will end there. I plan to end early, but everyone knows Fran Dev is a beast. Thanks again, guys, for being on with me. I really appreciate it. And the knowledge you shared was, it's gonna take all of these brands miles and miles, but also it's great to have you what feels like right next door.
Thank you so much for having us.
Guys.
Bye. Thank you.